Okay. Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. My name is Paul Taylor. I'm a budget analyst for OPI in the School Finance Division. With me today, I have Nancy Hall of the Governor's Office and also Donnell Rosenthal, our Transportation Director for OPI. If each one of you could say hello just to assure that we can all hear you, please.
Hello. Hello.
Perfect. So they both said hello. So each one of us will probably have a little bit of input for you. How I want to set this presentation up is it goes for an hour and a half. I've cordoned off 2 hours, so this could last until 12 if necessary. I got thinking about the presentation that I had put out a few days ago. I can't make the assumption that everybody has listened to it. And so what my plan is this. I'd like to go through the presentation again. We'll try to go as methodically and quickly, but as clearly as we possibly can. I want to give Ms. Hall the opportunity to speak, and also Donnell Rosenthal the opportunity to speak to certain things as well. Once we're finished going through the presentation, I think the easiest way would be for you to type questions into the chat box, and then we can go through those questions. With going on 60 folks signed in, I'm not so sure opening up everybody's microphone is a smart idea. Plus, I'm not all that clever for that stuff anyhow. So here we go. Let's talk about the Governor's Coronavirus Relief Fund for Transportation. The Governor has directed $75 million of federal coronavirus relief funds towards education. 65 million of those dollars went out to districts on a per A and B basis. This is the remaining $10 million. The remaining $10 million is to be directed to schools' transportation needs that may be increased because of coronavirus. Oh, it's a hard thing to say. So today we're going to discuss, hopefully in detail, processes related to how to budget and receive those dollars. So we want to start straight off with this overview mentioning that the coronavirus dollars for transportation are truly for transportation of students to and from school for school year 2021. However, it has to be noticed that expenditures or anything budgeted relating to this is only between the first day of school and December 30th. It's not the governor's decision to make it to December 30th. It's a federal requirement of that type of funding that the federal government has provided. So, and again, this is just the overview, just giving you sort of the setup. When you budget in the Mayfairs, or when you create your budget, you'll want to create a budget that's inclusive of whatever you consider to be your regular transportation budget, and also include all coronavirus related transportation needs. And that total budget would be the budget that you would enter into the Mayfair system. Just sort of getting us moving on those concepts. So this would be for both on and over schedule, if you're familiar with those terms. A little bit more of an overview, and then we're going to do a little bit of background, and then we'll get into the method. So in this overview, we want to discuss in that $10 million, what will the governor's office pay on? Well, if there is coronavirus related increases for transportation between the first day of school and December 30th, and they are applied to the overschedule portion that would result in increased property taxes, the $10 million would go to pay for that rather than increasing local property taxes for the fall portion of the coronavirus dollars or need. Districts will most likely also increase their on schedule, which I hope you know is paid for through county and state dollars. So if you're budgeting for increases in the fall for coronavirus, the county need may increase. And if you report appropriately to the governor's program called Submittable for these dollars, and you include the county portion, the county will be reimbursed before the county property taxes are assessed. So we're going to pay for local, county, and state. So again, if you're budgeting increases for fall COVID-related expenditures in your budget, all the on schedule, which is inclusive of the county and the state, again, you'll need to report appropriately to the governor's submittable program, and those funds will be distributed. The state portion will also be distributed directly to the school district. So again, it's an overview. We'll get into the details in a few minutes. So when we got this thing set up and we sort of built this PowerPoint, there was a whole lot of conversation about how tight the timeline is. And I totally understand. So we wanted to make some initial recognitions. We realized that there's a requirement in ARM that counties need to have their county transportation committee hearings before the fourth Monday of July. We understand that that time has passed. We're hopeful that those committee hearings were inclusive of increases related to coronavirus routes or individual contracts or extensions of routes or items related to approval that needed county approval. We just wanted to recognize that we know the timeline has passed for that. We also want to recognize that it's getting tight for the day at which districts need to adopt final budgets. It's coming up. It's on August 25th. Just putting it out there that, yes, we understand. One other thing that we want to provide to you that may not be a recognition, but may be a tool for you to help you getting prepared for understanding how to provide budgets and determine what portions are related to fall COVID-related budgeting expenditures is the transportation budgeting spreadsheet. And let me see if I can finagle this. I want to show it to you just in case you're not familiar with the spreadsheet, and then I may let Donnell have a few minutes to sort of like travel us through it. Let me see if I can do this without blowing up the world. Yeah, here we are. Hey, Donnell, could you say a few words? I'll click wherever you need me to click. Can you just say a few words about the budgeting spreadsheet for transportation, please?
Yes, so the budgeting spreadsheet, a district, in order to get an idea of what their reimbursements are going to be, they can enter their information into the spreadsheet. So what they would do is enter all information that are in the blue fields. So for instance, they would enter their route. They would enter their percentage, which is how much of that route is paid. So for instance, if they're a K-12, they would enter 100% there. They're going to enter their miles per day. Then, you know, if they have non-bus miles, which I don't think that will apply to this, They're going to enter their number of days that they're going to be operating, actual operation. The VIN will need to be entered, and just the last 4 or 5 digits is fine. You don't have to enter the whole entire VIN. You'll need to enter your rated capacity because that is part of the reimbursement, or that helps determine what the reimbursement will be. For your eligible riders, of course, everybody knows that you have to have at least 1 eligible rider in order to be reimbursed. So if you're just trying to get your reimbursement amounts on the spreadsheet, right now I would just recommend just entering 1 for an eligible rider. That way you can just get your amounts in there. And then if you slide to the end, under column Z is where you're going to get your amounts. So right now it says see comment. If there are any issues with what you have entered, it's not going to give you a amount. It's going to give you this to see the comment. Whoops, sorry. To see the comment that you may be missing. So, but then here is where all your reimbursements are going to fill in. Then, because you want to get your total budget, so then if you go to the individual contracts tab, you're going to enter all of your information for your individual contracts as well, because this is going to help you to determine your overall budget. Then if you slide to the end, thank you, under column P, this is where you're going to get your amounts for your contracts as well. So then this tab is your on schedule tab. After you enter all of your information for your bus routes and your individual contracts, this page is going to show you your estimated budget, such as your state portion, your county portion, and then the contingency you should set for your budget. Do you need me to explain any more?
No, I think that's a terrific overview. So what this spreadsheet could help districts with is determining the on-schedule portion of a budget, and it will calculate the estimated county and state shares, and that will become important later in this conversation as we go through the presentation. As far as over schedule, that would be any additional expenditures or any additional budget needed that that is not shown on this spreadsheet. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So we've been speaking with plenty of folks in the field. We wanted to bring this spreadsheet up and share it with you because you could use this spreadsheet to determine the on schedule for all routes, and then you could make a second copy of this spreadsheet and then only include the fall routes or individual contracts that may be attributable to expenditure needs or budgeting needs for the COVID portion that the governor will be paying on. So we just wanted to point this out, that this is a tool available to your district. It's located up on the OPI's website, and also I believe I set it up so that if you're in this PowerPoint, which I have also posted this PowerPoint on the website, you can click that link and it should take you directly there. Okay, thanks, Donnell. Did you have anything else you wanted to add right now?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, next. Oops, I'm hopping everywhere. Okay, Nancy, it's your turn. Let's have your, let's hear what you have to say about this.
Have to be able to get it unmuted first. Sorry. So by August 24th, I hope to have a new application out there available to the school districts. It'll be a really simple form to fill out. You'll put in your school district, and it'll be school districts. So elementary and high school will each have to fill out the form unless you're a K-12, and it'll have your LAE on it. And then we'll ask you for the COVID-related portion of the fall transportation costs to get students to and from school for county on schedule, state on schedule, and your local over schedule piece. So those three numbers we'll need to know, because those are the three pieces we're going to reimburse for the fall period of time. We only have the money available to us for expenditures through December 30th, not the 31st, through the 30th of December 2020. So we will use approximately 45%. That's 4 months of the 9 months you've got going. And we'll talk in a minute about how to calculate that 45% or that number that you're going to use. So that's really all the information you'll have. When you filled out your A and B request for funding, you checked a box whether or not you wanted the transportation funding. And so we will be opening the applications to those people who clicked yes. If for some reason when you filled out that application, you do have a transportation budget and you do want transportation money, email me, and my email's at the end of this presentation, or give me a call and let me know, because our intent is just to open up the application for those people who said yes, that they wanted transportation funds. The applications will be due to be completed by September 1. Now, this October 24th to September 1 period of time was set up because I know you're finishing up your budgets August 25th, and I thought that that would give you time as soon as you're done with your budgets to get in and give us that information. Only districts with the yes checked on the previous applications will get these applications.
Next slide.
Yep. The funding is for additional costs of transportation for getting students to and from school following CDC and social distancing guidelines through December 30th of 2020. So this is not for, you know, any other kind of transportation cost. This is just for getting kids to and from school. The funding is for additional transportation costs. I guess that repeats itself. I do want to make that very definitive that it's for to and from school, not any other cost, and that applies for the on schedule and the over schedule pieces. The application will ask for fall COVID related state on schedule costs, county on schedule costs, and the local over schedule costs related to the incremental transportation expenses that you come up with doing what Paul just talked about with your piece of the transportation budget. The reason that we used a formula, go ahead for the next slide. The reason we used the formula is because you will probably have transportation costs ongoing for the whole year, but because we only have this funding for expenses incurred through December 30th, we can only pay for a portion of it. We can't pay for the whole year. It is kind of anticipated that maybe we'll have more federal dollars coming out here in the future, but we don't know that at this point. The district will receive the payment for the state and the local portion, which Paul just told you that. And then we will notify OPI how much of the state piece we're going to pay. So when they make the payments in March and June, they will adjust those dollars out of the calculation.
All right. I went too far. I don't know what I did. Is this okay?
Yep. So in January, at the end of the period of time that we have to expend this money, we will have reporting, and it's the same with the CRF funds that you already have, the A and B funds, or that you will get here in the next couple of weeks if you're still applying. And we will ask for reports. We are not, the governor's office is not going to ask you to send receipts or documentation. You have checked boxes and said that you are spending this money on COVID related expenses for transportation, and we're using that. So you will have to answer to your auditors and show how that was COVID related expenses. So you need to keep track of what you calculate to be COVID expenses through the method that Paul's talked about, where you determine how much more this is going to cost you this year for transportation. And then your calculation for the percentage of how much of it is asked for in this for until December. And you can do that either by the 4 months of 9 months, or you can use how many days you will be in school between now and December 30th compared to now and the end of the school year. So assuming 180 days, if you were 94 days over 180 days, or if you're, depending on when you start school, you may start school here in the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure when everybody's starting back up, but so that calculation, that 45% is an estimate that you can, you know, determine the exact number at a daytime per day count, or you can use the month count. Just keep track of how you calculated that for audit purposes, so when they come back and ask you how you determined that, you've got a verification.
Okay.
Next slide.
Yep.
Okay, the allowable expenditures, and again, just reiterating this, transportation of students to and from school. This isn't your typical transportation costs. The governor is adamant that this money is being used for reopening of schools and get students to and from school.
Okay. Anything more you want to add at this time, Nancy, or should I take over?
Go ahead.
Okay. So we added this slide just to give a brief background about the transportation fund in case you needed a little bit of clarification or re-education. Not sure if I'm the one qualified to do it, but here we go. So districts in the state that have transportation programs are required to budget for this program. The costs go into a special revenue fund that is known as the transportation fund. So it's a budgeted fund and it's a special revenue fund. There's two parts to the fund. Law discusses a thing known as the schedule, and we often refer to that as the on schedule. That's the portion of the budget that is funded through state and county funds. There are formulas to determine what that reimbursement is. It has a lot to do with the mileage, the days, and the size capacity of the bus. For your district to receive funds on that on schedule, the money actually comes from two locations. The state piece is a general fund, a state general fund appropriation, and the county piece is generally funded through a county-wide levy, fund balance reappropriated in their county fund, or non-levy revenues in their county fund. So that's the on schedule. There's a second part to this budget or fund, The second portion is often referred to as the over schedule. And that doesn't appear in law, but we had to name it something, so it becomes over schedule. And that is intended to supplement additional costs necessary for transportation and transportation related expenditures. So the funding for this portion is generally gathered through a permissive local levy of property taxes, or if districts have at their site fund balance appropriated that comes over from the previous year, and also sometimes non-levy revenues if you happen to have those. So I just wanted to give you a kind of a review of what the fund looks like so that we can have a hopeful, clearer conversation going forward when we discuss on and over schedules. Okay, so that's all the introductory stuff you get. Now here we go again with here's the meat and potatoes of this process that we dreamt up. That for myself. Okay. So it has 4 steps, and we have this as a suggested methodology. We understand that you guys could create your own methodologies, but here is step 1. Step 1 is determine a non-COVID transportation budget for fiscal year 2021. And for this example, it's $100,000. I'll just say it straight off. I know you probably all have your full budget that is totaled in with any COVID-related expenditure needs. You may just need to back them out. So you can either start small and build big, or you can start big and then back off, if that makes sense. So for us, for this example, step 1 is figure out what your budget would be without COVID-related expenditures. Step 2, determine what your COVID transportation budget is. And in this example, it's $20,000. So here is what this method is suggesting. It's saying after you calculate your initial non-COVID budget, record the state aid, the county aid, and the local property taxes needed to support that budget. And that's why we went over the Excel spreadsheet earlier with Donnell, so that you could get an idea of where to go get help for that. You can fill in all the routes, you can fill in your individual contracts. The final on schedule tab shows you the state and county aid. Any additional expenditures are generally considered over schedule, and you'd have to determine what that local property tax amount would be. That would have to be done at your site in your own local way. So you could make that Excel spreadsheet, and then what you could do is you could create a copy of that spreadsheet, and you could then add routes related to any COVID-related activities for your transportation budget. And again, you would have to record the state aid needed, the county aid needed, and any increases to local property taxes. So the difference, or the increase over the non-COVID budget, would be representative of your COVID budget. I'm just going to say again, this is one method for doing it. You could start with the total budget and then back out the things that are COVID related. It's your choice how you handle this. This was just for ease of explanation. So that's steps 1 and 2. Step 3, this is where it gets slightly more challenging. We created a step 3A that says take the COVID transportation budget, which in this case, it's up there near step 2 there, it says is $20,000. It says take that COVID budget and split it into 2. 3A says that it would be the COVID budget from the first day of school until December 30th. So that is a portion of the $20,000. And in this example, that's $9,000. And like I was showing or said in the methodology, you would want to break the $9,000 out to be how much of that is related to state, how much is county, those two being your on schedule, and how much would be related to over schedule levies. So this is only for the COVID portion. I have to emphasize this again, that 3A is the COVID portion that is attributable to your first day of school through December 30th, because that is the only portion that the governor is able to make distribution of funds on. And that's why we have to break the COVID budget in half. Well, I'll probably refer to this as your fall COVID budget. The remainder of the $20,000 would be $11,000, and that would be the other half of your COVID budget, which would be anything remaining in the COVID budget between January 1 and the end of the school year. Now, I understand if you get into this and we can dice it 1,000 different ways, you may or may not need this information. It's just good to keep on hand in case for some reason the federal government makes the choice to inject additional funds into this program. You'll have it available. I think it might be a handy tool to just hang on to. So if you took the effort to break your regular and COVID budgets apart from each other, and you took the effort to determine how much of that is related to fall only, well, hang on to the number that was for spring. I'm not making any guarantees. I'm just saying I think it's a handy number to hang on to. Okay, so like I said in my pre-recorded, and I already repeated once here, if you're looking at what I've highlighted there, that funny brown color, that is the only portion that the governor's office is permitted to make any kind of financial distribution on. It's the fall COVID budget that represents routes and individual contract, transportation of students to and from school between the first day of school and December 30th. That's all. Okay. So now that you have those things hopefully calculated, which may be difficult, like Nancy was saying earlier, they're going to open up, the governor's office is going to open up their software. It's called Submittable. And I'm going to ask Nancy a question here. Nancy, when this gets to open, will you send us an email to distribute to schools so they know it's open, or will you distribute it somehow so people know they can get in there to report these three numbers?
I think we should do it both ways, that we'll try to notify everyone as well as have OPI put it up and the link to the application.
Okay. Okay, so look for a official email from OPI announcing the opening of the Submittable program to report the three yellow numbers in this example, or whatever your numbers are, to the governor's office so that your district then can receive the funds from the $10 million pot. Okay. So this highlighted green thing here is the one thing in the budget in Mayfair's that may be a little funny or new to you. It says here that districts must anticipate this amount, meaning the over schedule fall COVID portion of the budget, as non-levy revenue in the district transportation fund before you submit your budget to OPI. I have an example, a few screenshots here of Mayfair's so that you can see where to put that number. So I've been getting a lot of phone calls over the past 2 days as to what this means. It is specifically the overschedule levy portion that is attributed to COVID routes and individual contracts that happens between the first day of school and December 30th. It's not the whole thing, it's just the overschedule piece. And we'll, the example's in there later. So hopefully we get to it. Oh, yeah. Okay. So I said it was a 4-step process, and here is the 4th step. What do you enter into Mayfair's as your budget for this year? Well, I would like it if you are doing this methodology to add steps 1 and 2 together, and that would be 100,000 plus 20,000 equals 120,000. That would be the budget you would enter into the Mayfair system. So when you enter your budget this year for Mayfair's for transportation, it includes your base budget and the full year's need for the COVID transportation budget. Again, we'll have to split hairs when we get to the chat, but that's assuming that you're running COVID-related transportation routes for a full school year. We could see that the possibility exists that maybe you're just going to run COVID-related routes for the fall. You know, I don't want you to butch up your budgets. Those are things that you'll have to consider on your own. Okay, so like I said, we'll take a quick look at a couple screens in Mayfair's. So when you enter into Mayfair's, you go to the budget side. There's a button all the way to the left that says you can enter your budget and the reserves. So you click add a new budget record. You click the drop down and there's your adopted budget. You punch in the total adopted budget. And from the example, that was $120,000. Just trying to drive home the point that when you adopt your budget, adopt it for your full need, which would be inclusive of a base budget plus a COVID budget. So the on schedule portion, so as you're working through Mayfair's, the button right next to adopting the budget says on schedule. You click the on schedule, and what you enter here is everything again that is for on schedule. So when you did your 2 spreadsheets, if you choose to do it that way, let's say you made a spreadsheet for regular budget, and let's say you made a spreadsheet for the COVID budget, you would add those together and enter them in as on schedule. Don't forget to include everything that you need for on schedule. Okay, and then like I was saying, this is the one thing that's a little bit weird. This is the thing that I had highlighted in green earlier. What it is a button next to the on schedule button called revenues. And when you go on to the revenues tab and you click add a new budget record and you click the drop down button, there's a choice. It's the CARES Governor's Coronavirus Relief Fund for Transportation. If you want to receive the governor's money for the overschedule, you'll need to enter that amount into this cell. So you go to revenues, do the drop down, pick that choice. And from the example, it was $6,480. So we took the, if you can remember, it was $9,000. We broke it up between on and over schedule. This is the amount that you put for over schedule related to fall coronavirus transportation increases. Boy, I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's talk about, that was Mayfair's. Let's talk about revenues themselves. So now we're back here looking at the example screen, and you went into the governor's submittable program and you reported to the governor's office the 3 numbers, the state, the county, and the overschedule. So what happens here is the following. The state part, it says here, the governor's office will take the number that you reported to them, and the governor then will pay the district. So the money goes from the governor's office straight to the district, the amount that you requested for state. But there's a little bit more to it. Once the governor sends that money to the district, they're going to send a list to OPI of how much they actually sent to the district for the state piece. So when we receive it here at the OPI, we're going to take the amount that your district received for the state piece, and we're going to reduce your transportation 1 payment by that amount. The logic being this: when you put your claims in for Transportation 1 that we normally pay in March, it's our understanding that the governor paid a portion of that to your district already. And so we'll have to reduce the Transportation 1 payment in an amount equal to the amount that the governor had already paid on behalf of the state anyhow. So that gets into some kind of, concern that, well, sometimes when your prepayment goes out, it pays down the full Transportation 1. And then what would happen? Well, what would happen is we'd have to reduce it off the Transportation 2 payment instead of the March payment. It would be reduced off of the June payment instead. That's currently the plan for these funds. So go ahead and ask for the state money. Just realize that your claims will be reduced in an amount equal to the amount that the governor will be essentially prepaying. And Nancy, did you have an estimate on when the governor would be making the distributions?
I'm hoping to have them out by September 11th.
Yeah. So that means it's almost like a prepayment also. So you'll have the funds available well before December 30th. When you receive them, make sure you expend them so that you can say, well, we followed the rules. The rules were make expenditures before December 30th.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's why I want to get them out by September, so you don't have to expend them out of your transportation funds and then have to move them later, move the expenditures. That I thought if we got them out early, then you could be expending them as the main expenditure.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Okay, let's talk about the county piece that was reported to the governor's office through that submittable program. So we want you to, once submittable opens, we want you to get this done as soon as you can. I know timing's horrible, but please go into the submittable program and report these numbers, because what we'll do is, or what the governor's office is going to do is, once they receive the amount that you're asking for on behalf of the county, once all those districts have entered their data to the submittable program, the governor's office is going to add up all the district county numbers by county, and they're going to take that amount and they're going to send that amount to the county. So you as a district do not receive the county funds. Your county receives the county funds. But the trick is this: we have to somehow get those numbers to the counties before the counties assess the county levies, because we want to make sure we don't accidentally increase county property taxes. Instead, the county will receive these as a form of non-levy revenue. And so timing is really essential. And tax bills go out very early November, so we're shooting to get this all wrapped up in the next couple weeks, if that's possible. Something I mentioned in my pre-recording. Yes, we know there's joint districts. Yes, we think we can divide out the county pieces appropriately. And then the overschedule piece. Remember, that was the increase of property taxes on the fall COVID amounts. Well, you'll be reporting that number that you need in both Mayfairs as a non-levy revenue, and you'll also take that number and you're going to report it into the governor's submittable program, and we're going to match those two values to make sure that you're entitled to receive the money. So let me restate this. I'll try to be as clear as possible. You're going to report to the governor's office how much increase in property tax for the overschedule is related to fall COVID related expenses. You're going to take that same number and you're going to report that in Mayfairs in that revenues tab as non-levy revenue. What's going to happen before the governor sends the money out is we're going to go ahead and compile a list of how much districts by district entered in as non-levy revenue. And I'm going to send that to the governor's office. And the governor's office, before they send the money directly to the district, is going to check to assure that you estimated it as non-levy revenue. The reason for this, if you don't estimate it as non-levy revenue, then you'll be assessing property taxes on your property taxpayers. And then if the governor's office goes ahead and sends out an equal amount of money to your district, you'll be getting a double payment, and yet you won't have budget authority to spend it because your budget authority is limited to the amount of non-levy revenues and property taxes and such. So we can wrestle with that a little bit more later if necessary. Okay, so that's about the revenues. About reporting this stuff in your accounting software and then next year on your trustee's financial summary. There's accounting guidance that has been provided. It's been posted up on the website. We're asking that you distribute or deposit the funds from the governor's office for this money into your Fund 10 under Revenue Source Code 7710. We ask that you record your expenditures using Program Code 70771. And finally, oops, sorry, Donnell, but maybe it's a blessing. Nancy and my contact information is here. Okay, that ends the formal presentation. Now it's your turn. If you have questions or you want further clarification, enter your questions into the chat box. Currently, there's a whole pile of them here. I'm going to start from the very top and just start reading through them, and then maybe the three of us can answer these as best as possible. Question 1 from Circle Schools. It says, so if we have a parent who wants an individual transportation after the budgets have been adopted because of COVID, normally this was come out of contingency. Can this come from the governor's COVID funds? You want to handle that, Nancy? Does that make sense?
I think I can. It would be my suggestion that since it's not in your transportation budget, that you use the CRF funds for that. And those CRF funds can be used, it's a COVID related expense. So I would think you would take it out of the CRF funds that you've received.
Okay, that's a possibility because, yeah, otherwise you'd have to have a budget amendment to attain the authority to make the extra expenditure. So that does lead to another question I keep getting on the phone quite a bit, Nancy. Let's say a district goes ahead and budgets for that inevitability. Let's say a parent says they do want an individual contract, and just because they're guessing it's going to come, and they ask the governor's office for money that maybe they're not going to spend, just so they have their budget all ready to roll. What would be the requirement? Would they just return the funds to the governor's office?
At the end of the time period, at the end of December, and probably early in December, we'll contact everyone to see where they are with the spending of all of these funds, both the CRF funds and these transportation CRF funds, and see if anybody's going to have anything to return. If you can't expend it, then yes, we have to return it and we have to give it back to the feds.
Okay. Another question from Circle Schools. It says, if we use this for individual transportation, it would only be state and county reimbursement, no overschedule, right? Donnell, you want to take that one?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. It says if they decide to use this for individual transportation contracts, that would only be state and county reimbursement. It wouldn't apply to the overschedule.
That's correct.
What if they wanted to have a individual contract that was within the 3-mile limit? Could they pay for that through their overschedule?
Well, statute states in order to be an eligible rider, they've got to be more than 3 miles.
Okay.
That would be under 2010-101.
Okay. So the next question says, where does the 45% of incremental COVID expenses come from? Well, Kelly, it's not necessarily 45%. How we got that idea is, and I talked this over with Denise the other day, I said, you know, if a district has its regular budget and then it creates a COVID budget, and because the expenditures for reimbursement are only related to the first day of school through December 30th, that's approximately 45% of your coronavirus budget. And so we were saying that 45% gets you in the ballpark, but you actually have to do the work to determine what expenditures are COVID related and come up with those dollars by doing your own work, maybe using that budgeting spreadsheet and some other tools to determine what portion of the budget is fall corona related. We believe it's approximately 45% of your corona budget. I hope that answers that question. The next question says, would this cover additional bus driver salaries for bus sanitation after routes? Nancy?
Sorry, I unmuted again. The governor was adamant that this money is for getting students to and from school. If in your expenditures, a part of it is the bus driver cleaning the bus after the students have ridden, I would assume that those would be COVID-related expenses, and they could either be paid by the CRF funds that were distributed per A and B or by these transportation funds.
Okay. Jen, I haven't talked to you in a good long time. Hi, it says, Paul, where is the presentation posted? If you go out to the OPI website, you go to opi.mt.gov and you hover over leadership, there is a school finance button. If then when that page loads, if you click about school finance, you'll see a new screen load, and off to the right-hand side of the screen is information for webinars. And this presentation that's being recorded right now will be posted there along with the PowerPoint and the pre-recorded webinar that I did 2 days ago. It was also all listed out and linked in the official email that was provided 2 days ago. The next question says, I missed the beginning of the meeting. Is there a list of fund amounts by district? The answer is no, that you'll need to go ahead and figure out what is the increased costs relating to COVID transportation expenditure needs between the first day of school through December 30th. Currently, I'm of the understanding that it is a $10 million pot, but you'll have to design that yourself. Do you have anything more to add to that, Nancy?
I do, and if the question was related to the CRF funds as well, if you go to the Department of Commerce website, the list of who got money last week and how much should be out there. If it's not, it will be soon because we post that transparency every week. And so these funds will also show up. But at this point, the $10 million is available, and the distribution will depend on what you turn in a couple of weeks for need.
Okay. The next question says, so if we check yes on the application for COVID, I'm sorry, it says if we did not check yes on the application for COVID, we are not eligible for transportation funding, or are you saying, could we email you and get the application open to change that radio button?
Della, since you have my email already, just let me know and we can fix it so you can get that. And that's true for anybody. The idea was that we would have some idea how many districts needed transportation funding. And so if you, for some reason, check no on your original CRF application, just let me know. Again, my contact's right here on this slide that we're on.
Okay. Next says, so if we're running an additional route because of COVID, we could figure the number of days through December 30th. I believe that answer is correct. It's from the first day of school, between that first day of school and December 30th. Yes, you could pop that into the budgeting spreadsheet to calculate what that would cost for the on schedule, and then any additional expenditures that are attributed to over schedule increases. You could add those two values together. Yes. What if the estimated expenditures do not materialize? I believe they're going to need to return them to the governor's office, but I'm going to let you talk to that, Nancy.
Well, this is a really good question, and this has come up a lot. The idea of this funding, both the CRF funding per A and B and this transportation funding, was for reopening of schools and expenditures for getting us there. And we realized that in a week, 2 weeks, a month, we may all shut down and not have these. The governor does have flexibility with these funds, and so at that time, if that happens, he would redetermine what these funds could be used for, and either we have to return them or we would have to issue new guidance as to how they could be expended. At this point, we're kind of going forward that transportation funding will be used for transporting students to and from school.
Okay, perfect. Chris is asking, how about PPE, sanitizing supplies, gloves, masks, disinfectant, hand sanitizer? What do you think, Nancy?
So I think this transportation money is not intended for those things. That's what the CRF per A and B funding was for. And the purpose of this funding is to transport students to and from school.
Okay. The next one I've got, it says, so in the budget, the spring COVID budget would essentially be paid as regular transportation expenditures should we decide, for instance, to continue with extra COVID routes. Yes, that is exactly correct. So if you were to have a COVID budget and you report your fall COVID increases to the governor's office, yes, they get paid and no property taxes would not increase. However, if you're planning on running those same routes through the spring, as of today, they would be increases to your budget and would increase local property tax, state claims, and county property tax as well. The next guy there says, what do we do if we already submitted our budget to OPI? You would contact myself or Nika Marala or anybody here in the school finance division, and we can unsubmit you, just with the understanding that when you resubmit again, that submit ID number will change. So if you printed your budget out in paper, you don't want to print a new one because it has a new submit ID. And a lot of times your county, the OPI, and yourselves match that submit ID to ensure that the budget is the same one seen in all 3 locations. But yep, we can unsubmit you. We still have time. Gail says, I think I can assume that these funds will not assist with anything to do with athletics, only educational routes. My understanding is it costs almost double for our athletic busing expenses because of the requirements they set forth on the numbers. No part of this money can be used for this expense, I assume meaning the athletic transportation. They're asking the question. Nancy?
That would be correct. This is just for your educational expenses, getting students to and from school for your regular school day.
Yep. Okay, Jen says, what if the 10 million isn't enough?
If the 10 million isn't enough, then we'll deal with that when it comes. This money's coming from the governor. It's a portion of the large amount of money that was granted by the federal government to the governor to distribute. And we have done our best, Paul and I have done our best to calculate, and we think that 10 million will be plenty ample. We'll deal with it when we get to that point.
Chris asks, she says, do I enter a zero in the estimated revenues or the budgeted revenues as 7710 if the district does not have a need? You don't have to enter a zero. You can leave it blank. I did, however, have a different question earlier today from Steve Hamill. He says he has a school that has a unique situation. He says that it's a small school that has a transportation budget, but what they currently do is they only budget in the overschedule area. And they were saying, is it possible that they don't have to fill in the state and county pieces, but request of the governor money only to support the overschedule? And there's multiple reasons that could happen. One is they run buses, but the buses all run within 3 miles. Possible, and we do have a school like that. I know we do. I think it's Pine Creek, I'm not positive. Or a school that has a transportation budget for the purposes of raising funds that then they contract with another district. And so what they do is they levy to their overschedule their property taxes, and then they take those funds and they send them to the other district to help support the needs for their small bit. Nancy, would it be okay if the governor's office received numbers for a zero for state, a zero for county, and then a value for the overschedule piece?
I think as long as it's for transportation for those students to and from school and the COVID-related expenses, it's going to be up to the school district to verify to the auditors that that was what the money was used for.
Okay, Rebecca, I haven't talked to you in a long time either. How are you? It says, at this point, we only have one additional expense that amounts to 1, hiring staff to clean the bus after each route, and 2, adding an in-town route. Can we use this funding to pay for those 2 reasons? If yes, it would all be included in the overschedule amount. Is that correct? I have an answer, but I want to hear what Nancy has to say.
Why don't you answer first then?
Okay. Hiring staff to clean the bus after each route, I do not believe is a permissible expense for this, because it's not necessarily taking students to and from school, but adding an in-town route, that is transporting students to and from school. And if they currently have that within the 3 miles and it's just over schedule, I say yes. What do you say?
Well, I kind of think that this goes back to the question earlier about can we have somebody, can we use these funds to pay somebody to clean the bus after the bus has gotten back, and that's part of the COVID expenses. So I think if you budget for this in your transportation fund, then as an on-schedule expense, then I wouldn't be above paying for it. You also have the CRF funds to help pay for it, the per A and B funds.
Okay. Next question says, in Mayfair's, the adopted budget should include the COVID budget for the full year. Yes, if you plan on running COVID-related routes for a full year, then yes. When recording the on schedule, over schedule, and revenues for COVID, is it only for the fall? Well, when reporting the on and over schedule to the governor's office, yes, it's only for the fall portion because that's the only portion that is permitted to have reimbursement. But when you enter that non-levy revenue for the over schedule in your Mayfair's budget, that number is also only for the fall portion because that's the only portion that will be paid on. I hope that makes sense. Do we need to code fall COVID expenditures in the transportation fund differently? Yes, your fall COVID expenditures will need to be recorded to program code 771. Breezy says, could these funds be used to pay for a staff member to ride the bus to check temperatures, distribute masks, and control social distancing? I'll leave that to you, Nancy.
Well, again, I think if that's something that you budget in your transportation fund, and if it's part of your over schedule, I mean, because it's obviously not the on schedule or the for the county or the state, then I think those are justifiable expenses to be paid.
Okay. Craig says, from Billings, he says, if ridership drops in the fall due to many students opting for remote learning, therefore reducing our on-schedule reimbursement, will that lack of reimbursement qualify for CRF transportation money? If so, how do we go about estimating that impact?
I think that's a really tough question. And Paul and I've kind of tossed this around, what you do. I mean, so we shut down schools after 2 or 3 weeks. Again, I think then you need to notify me or Paul, OPI, or myself probably, or McCall Flynn, the education policy person in the governor's office, and let us know what the situation is, and we can make determination at that time. This funding is somewhat flexible, and we don't want, I mean, the intent of this transportation money is, as I've said many times, to get students to and from school. And that's what we'd like to use it for. But if we get to the point where there's a situation that you can't spend it on those kind of things, we may just have to ask for it back. It's an ongoing situation.
Yeah, I guess to back that up is, well, Craig, I guess if you budgeted for additional routes and you know that they're COVID related, and let's say, you know, you build it and they don't come, right? Let's say you put the route in, you know that it's going to run, school starts and everybody goes and does homeschooling or something else, and then you don't need the funds. Well, if you requested the funds of the governor's office at the end of the term, you would have to return those funds to the governor's office. Is that what you're thinking also, Nancy?
Yes, and I mean, I think it's going to have to be up to you, the school district, to make the determination of what COVID expenses related to, I mean, so if you calculate, for instance, the 45% for the fall transportation, and 3 routes don't materialize, you're going to have to make that determination what those expenses were in actuality and how much of that would have to return to the governor's office.
Okay, Della's back. It says, if we don't see a need for COVID transportation funds at this time, but something comes up that we do need to run an additional bus route, we can use the per A and B CRF for that purpose, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Those funds can be used for transportation as well. We were trying, when we determined to put this into the transportation fund, how you could budget for the COVID related expenses throughout the year and still get reimbursed for a portion of that without having to go miscellaneous programs fund. Because if you had these additional expenses for the 45% of your year, you were potentially going to budget for them and then increase property taxes, or you were not going to have the funds to pay for those expenses. So we thought that by budgeting for them and doing this, this was the easiest way to make sure you had your funding for the spring transportation costs.
Okay, Gwen's after us. It says, I guess I don't understand why these funds cannot be used for PPE for drivers and students. If students are required to wear masks on the bus, I believe it is a cost of getting students to and from school. Gwen, I don't know. I'm going to answer on behalf of Nancy. I think the intent is that these funds were for transporting students to and from school. And I think that it was highly suggested that the other pot of money, the 65 million per A and B pot of money, was to be used for PPE. I'm also going to go out on a limb here, and Nancy's going to follow me up here, I'm sure. Isn't there PPE being distributed through a different mechanism anyhow, Nancy?
Well, there is some PPE coming out, and I believe every school district's involved in that comes through the Department of Emergency Services, because they were able to get bulk supplies. But if a district needs to buy PPE, definitely the CRF A and B funding was the intent of that funding, and this is for transportation costs. So your bus routes specifically.
Okay, Trinette says, if schools get shut down, can these funds continue to pay for staff delivering meals and materials directly to students like we did in the spring?
That is to be seen. We don't know at this point. That's not the intent. And because the governor wanted this to be for transportation to and from school, he's been adamant that that's the way we would distribute this and that's the way we would spend it. You have the CRF funding, and that can be used, the per A and B funding. You also have the ESSER funds, and that can be used for those expenses. So at this time, that is not an intent of this funding.
Okay. Brian, I hear you. I've been hearing this phone call quite a bit. It says the roadblock in the use of this money is the lack of bus drivers available to run the routes. We need to add routes due to COVID, but we can't due to the lack of drivers. Are there any options for additional drivers? I have no. Donnell, do you have any suggestions for folks?
I actually don't. I mean, that's a hard one. A lack of drivers is happening nationwide. I just don't know how to answer that.
I agree. I think I've had that phone call 10 times in the past 2 days. I know that Washington State actually is delaying their school year, and I know that some contractors are actually going to bring folks in from Washington State. I heard that through Knoxon schools yesterday, but I know that, well, Great Falls isn't right that close either, right? So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer to that one either. Let's see. Chris says our bus contractor is passing through, oops, where'd that go? It says our bus contractor is passing through the PPE expenses to our school. I hear you, Chris. I guess I imagine that you'll pay for that out of the per A and B piece or the ESSER funds. How about wireless for the provision of distance learning? We received guidance this spring that we could pay the wireless for these families in the provision of FAPE. I think we're repeating stuff at this point. Yeah, I remember that it was in the spring. I think Nancy's mentioned it multiple times that it's for transporting students to and from school. I believe the wireless funds could maybe be paid for out of the 65 million, but I don't want to have the final say on that. Go ahead, Nancy.
That is true. This money is to be spent for bus routes to and from school. And you have the CRF funds and the ESSER funds that can be used for your wireless and for your other needs related to COVID.
The next one says parents become the bus drivers bringing the kids to school. Oh, I think that's related to our of what do we do about getting bus drivers. Yeah, parents becoming bus drivers is true if you have additional, if you have individual contracts being added. Boy, I can't suppress the need to be sarcastic a little bit. Maybe a parent has their CDL. Sorry, I know that was a bad taste. Let's see. If we add a route now due to COVID and it has not been approved by the county, all costs would be over schedule and eligible for this funding. How are COVID-related costs after December 30th to be paid for? Increased property taxes? Well, right. So way back when I had one of my first slides, I said, I know that your counties had their meetings already to approve routes. The hope was that at that time they had approved additional routes that may be due to COVID. I think there may, if we go, I'll have to defer to Donnell, but are there emergency provisions that allow county transportation committees to modify those? And when would that end, Donnell?
Well, I don't think it really ends. I mean, if there's an addition to a route or, for instance, say a new student moves into the district and they end up needing an individual contract, then the county can meet any time in the year to approve those.
Okay, so there's still time for a county transportation committee to modify what they've approved already. The second part of the question is, how are COVID-related costs after December 30th to be paid for? And it says, do we increase property taxes? Yes, is how it is currently. If you choose to run COVID routes for a full school year, going through into this school year, only expenditures attributed to the fall portion are paid for currently through this governor's mechanism that we've described. If you choose to continue running those routes through the spring, yes, they could fall on the county, state, and local property taxpayer. Rebecca says, could we purchase a type E bus with these funds to hire a driver more easily? It has different licensure requirements for the additional routes due to COVID. We do not currently have any type E buses. so I hope I'm asking this correctly. A type E bus, Nancy, is a car.
I would say no. It's like other federal funds. When you buy a major asset like that, then when you're done with the grant, you have to turn that back over. And I don't think you want to be doing that. So it would be a short-lived, now you could, you know, pay for a driver from now until the end of December. The problem is that you have to be aware that that funding is only available until the end of December. And so to buy a bus, to buy a van, a whatever in the type E bus category would not be an eligible expense.
Ken jumped in here, Ken Bailey from OPI here, our CFO. He pointed out a terrific thing that maybe we're not all considering. He says those ESSER funds, they're the dollars that are from the federal government through the OPI. He says, well, those funds are available through September of 2022. And you could use those for COVID-related transportation expenses. So I know it'd be super tricky to determine your budget, but you can't really budget those ESSER funds into your transportation fund because they go into your Fund 15, Miscellaneous Programs Fund. But if you were cautious in how you went about developing your budget, you could somehow shift the expense from your transportation budget for the COVID spring expenditures and pay for them possibly out of your Fund 15's ESSER funds if requested appropriately. Boy, Ken, I hope I said that well enough. And miraculously, I have come to, no, I haven't. I had come to the end of the chat box, but here we have a new one. Hey, Ellen, it says, can we offset spring costs with other revenue to avoid increasing taxes and discontinue COVID-related services in January? That just lends itself directly to the comment that Ken had provided to us. Sure, you could. You could then pay for transportation costs using either the $65 million per A and B dollars from the governor's office and also possibly the ESSER funds that are available through the OPI. I think that's a terrific thought. And now, once again, I've come to the bottom of the chat box. No, I haven't. Oh, thanks, Chris. Yeah, Chris says, thanks for the detailed information meeting. It helped a lot. We're almost out of time. I'll give you another 30 seconds here to pop something in the box if you need to. Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap this thing up. So, okay, so in closing, I want to thank Nancy Hall of the governor's office. I want to thank Donnell Rosenthal. Her contact information is on the OPI School Finance website if you need to get a hold of her. She is our OPI's transportation director, and she can help you with entering anything into that budgeting spreadsheet and also with your transportation claims in the transportation program. You feel free to go ahead and give me a call or email. I'll help any way I can. I believe Nancy probably holds that same feeling. I know it's frustrating. I know the timing's horrible. We're really trying to do the best we can. I really, truly hope you do attempt to tap into this $10 million so that we can get this to your schools. Does anybody else have any closing thoughts? Okay. Well, with that, I appreciate your time and have a good day. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye.